Good afternoon. This is the latest edition of Warriors, Hard Chargers, and Patriots, connecting the little dots to the big dot. Today I want to talk about the necessity of knowing your people. I mean, really knowing your people. As of late, we've seen some great Navy leaders out there, leaders probably in other services as well, but in particular, I've been watching some Navy leaders who have presented their people to us so that we all get to know them and we get to know a little bit maybe even about their families. And it's just such a great idea and such a skillful way to do things. I wish I would have thought about it when I had Carl Vinson way back in 1996 to 1999, but I didn't. So my hat is off to these wonderful people. But really, I want to even go a step beyond this exercise, and that is, I mean, getting to know about what operating system your people are operating on that motivates them to do exceptional things or to fall off the cliff and when some particular adverse reaction occurs that causes them to act out, if you will. This is really the most important thing from a standpoint of making sure that you're creating a work environment and just a social environment for these people that will resonate with them, that'll reinforce their needs and wants. And while you're never going to find every one of these people who have exceptional issues and or challenges, you can't stop trying. You've got to figure out what it is that these people are about and what makes them tick and why did they come to join the Navy and all of these other things. I start this with the old then Ensign Charles Plum story because I'd read his book before I ever had command of Carl Vinson, and it really caused me to understand that there were a lot of people on this ship that I didn't really know, and I need to spend a lot more time getting to know them. Just to refresh, in 1975, or 1967 rather, Ensign Plum was on his 75th combat mission over Vietnam when he got shot down. He parachuted safely to the ground, but was quickly captured by the enemy force and was sent to the Hanoi Hilton, where he spent 2,106 consecutive days in a variety of different types of confinement and torture and all of the unimaginable things that they were doing to those people. When he was repatriated, he came back, acclimated himself into his family life, and one night he was out having dinner I think in Kansas, at a steakhouse, and he noticed this man that kept looking at him and even pointing at him once in a while in a conversation with whoever was at his table. And this young man then came over and said, "You're Charles Plum." And he goes, "Well, yes, I am, but how did you know that?" He says, "You were a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 6 years." And he said, "How in the heck do you know that?" And he says, "I was your parachute packer. I packed the parachute for you before in your aircraft, and it must have worked." So Charles Plum then basically came to the thought that said, I never ever thought of who was packing my parachute, who was spending hours daily, folding the silks of various parachutes, making sure they're spec, making sure there's 100% guaranteed to bloom out when they need to bloom out, and never thought of this young man. Didn't know him, wouldn't have known him if he walked by him in the passageway. And he really began to think about the fact that there were so many people around him that were doing things for him, from ship's laundry to religious services to the preparations of meals to just being a comrade in arms. So somebody that was doing something for him that he maybe not even didn't know about. So he began to think about all of those parachute packers, his emotional parachute packer, his religious parachute packer, his physical parachute packer, and the list could go on as long as you want it to go on. But in reflection of that, I began to think about, well, I had 5,000 parachute packers here. I wish I would have thought about reading this book earlier than that, because I had parachute packers from the first day that I joined the Navy. I had parachute packers when I was 2 years old, 3 years old, 1 year. I mean, we all have people who are supporting us, and oftentimes we forget to thank them. So I spent a good part of my day every day asking people what they did, making sure that their dot was connected to the big dot, and how much I valued and appreciated that, because these were experts in their particular field, whatever that field was. Certainly much better and more apt to be able to perform the job than I was. And so it was helpful for me to understand what they were doing and why they were doing it. But that's, again, just getting to know who your people are. And I'm not trivializing that. That's absolutely critical. But there was a piece that came to the forefront when Admiral Archie Clemens, who was the Pacific Fleet at the time, one of the greatest Americans ever, in my humble opinion. Got to know him and got to work with him a little bit. And he had sent out a personal message to all commanding officers. Now, personal messages really weren't personal. They got seen by a lot of people, but it's irrelevant, because the message, to me, it was just a letter to me, and even though I knew it wasn't. And it went something like this. He was basically telling us that we were, as commanding officers, not doing enough to make sure that we were retaining our first-term sailors. The attrition rate was a lot higher than the Navy wanted it, and he felt, and rightfully so, that we could do better. And I read his message over and over again because I never wanted to disappoint the man. I also wanted to make sure that I was doing my job right. And I thought about this, winning the hearts and minds thing. I've said this before: if you can win the hearts and minds of a person, they'll follow you anywhere and do anything for you. And I felt like I had the shoulders down part reasonably well intact. I mean, I was always working on it, getting better, never being happy with where I was at. But I think I just had a feeling that I could motivate and incite people to do things based on just connecting their dot to the big dot. But I wasn't prepared, nor was I doing, I think, I don't know how good of a job I was doing, because it just was not in my wheelhouse from the shoulders up, the mental piece of this. So I had a couple back and forths with Admiral Clemens' staff and trying to figure out, how I could get some help to try to work the shoulders up piece. And one night I was sitting on the bridge and the phone rang, and Admiral Clemens was calling me from Hawaii. He says, "Dave, I've been watching all the traffic and reading all the little notes that are being shared back and forth. It sounds like you need some help or want some help. What can I do for you?" I said, I have no idea whether I'm asking for the right thing, but I think I either need a clinical psychiatrist or psychologist, somebody who can team up with me and help me work and understand what's going on up here with our young men and women, especially those that are in need of help. That I'm just not smart enough to pick up when I'm walking by them and asking them how they're doing. Because they're always going to tell me they're doing great, right? I mean, that's what they're programmed to do, which is not necessarily what I wanted, but that's the way it worked. So he told me that if I could go find a medical officer, a psychologist who wanted to embark and deploy for endless months on end, that he would get me a billet. And so I went to BUMed, worked with some friends at the Bureau of Navy Medicine, worked with some associates and friends who had, all the contacts, knew all of the various people in various pockets of medical practice. And this doctor by the name of Kaufman popped up. I don't think he'll mind me using his name. He is still practicing today, doing miraculous things on behalf of young men and women who have various mental maladies, a lot of PTSD type of things, and he is doing leading edge work to this day as a Red Cross volunteer. And I have to tell you, this is a man that the Navy and a lot of other places could use, because he's truly exceptional. Well, he was also a senior medical officer, so I was able to fill 2 billets at once. So I we had a conversation. I don't remember all the facts that went into this. It went so fast. But here he shows up on the ship, and we have a conversation, and he knew why I wanted him there, and I knew why I wanted him there, or maybe I didn't know, but I was going to find out. And off he went to work. Now the medical department is on the second deck. That's the main deck of the ship, if you will, the main traffic arteries where people go to and from their birthing compartments. All the dining facilities are on that deck. So it's personnel down there, supply department, all of those very busy places are down there. And so I was used to going down every morning on my way to wherever I was going, just to see what the length of the sick call line was. The length of the sick call line could tell me several things. First of all, there were also some common people that were there every day, and that always got my attention, just trying to figure out what was going on. I presume they were physical related maladies, right? And but the length of the line could depend on a variety of different things. If we'd been at sea for endless weeks and months on end, you'll see that line get longer, and it'll vary depending on what we're doing, where we're at. Well, it wasn't a week after he got there, and a second sick call line started to form. And the second sick call line was getting longer and longer, and I finally went into Doc Kaufman's office, and I asked him, I said, "So, what's this second sick call line about?" And he smiled at me. He said, "Shoulders up, Captain, shoulders up." These are all people who have a different kind, it's a non-physical malady. They have something going on inside of their heads, inside of their brains, that they're trying to come to grips with, and they're asking for our help. And so we had a long discussion about this. And I said, well, how do we approach this? How can I, I'm just a helicopter pilot with a nuclear power background, hardly qualified to do what you're doing. And we came up with an idea that on weekends, whether we were in a port, it was hard to do at sea, but in port, especially if we were back in the Bremerton area where we were home ported, or even if we were on a Liberty port in some foreign country where we had some time on any given morning. And we would meet with one-on-one. It would be a young man or woman, Doc Kaufman and I. We'd sit in my import cabin. The import cabin on an aircraft carrier is a very palatial place. It's usually used for distinguished visitors and other special guests. Most captains probably never spent a night. I never spent a night in that stateroom sleeping. So I passed by there to grab a cup of coffee. I had a little office on that sat on the sideline there, but never used it. But it was quiet and it was private. So we would have a young person come in. Doc Kaufman would tell them basically that what I wanted to do, which was the truth here. I wanted to learn and hear what was going on, why he or she joined the Navy, what their challenges were, what was the baggage that they were dealing with, because the baggage never goes away. And I always contend that every one of us have baggage of some sort or another. Again, just like the old operating system model, if your disk operating system it becomes corrupted, then you don't know what the reaction is going to be in terms of where the data goes, or this time in terms of where the spontaneous or physical types of things go in terms of how you react to various things. So off we went. Now I probably would estimate that we probably had 25 or 30 people over maybe a year to a year and a half. I mean, because what would happen is some of them would start getting into sort of buckets. There were some that are very similar. For example, I had a lot more young men and women who came from gang life or no life. I mean, they either were on the streets doing nothing or were absorbed by gangs who offered them a tribe. Now the tribe was caustic, it was toxic, it was dangerous, it was lethal. A lot of these people came to us because they were trying to survive. They recognized that drug wars and other types of tribal wars, gang wars, resulted in a lot of their friends, their family members being killed and or severely injured. And sometimes themselves just barely hanging on before they realized they had to get out of there. So that was an interesting bucket because it recognized to me that they really valued the need for a strong tribe where we become all great, where we're working together to become all great. And we are all working to one team, one fight ethos. And it reinforced to me that, it wasn't just a pipe dream. There were young men and women who were now wearing a different set of colors that were attributed to the core values of honor, courage, and commitment, and taking an oath that had nothing to do with killing your neighbor or stealing something from somebody else, but working with each other to again connect our own individual dots to the big dot. And so that was an interesting bucket. There were some people who came from very affluent areas or very affluent environments, but there was no family life there. There was nothing there for them. I had a young man, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about 4 or 5 stories just to give you an example. But I'm not going to get anywhere close to giving you any details or any names or there's no way I respect these people. I love them today. I invested a lot of time in them because they were working a lot harder, as it turns out, than I was to make sure that they mattered there and that they were making a difference. And that just incited me to want to even work harder as well. So this young man was from the Midwest. His parents were wealthy. He had lived in a mansion, had access. He was 16 or 17 years old, had access to all kinds of cars and boats and whatever, liquor cabinet, the whole 9 yards, it was there for him. And the day that he could join the Navy, he did. He had thought this out. He just needed to get out of there. He wasn't sure the Navy was the right place to go, but the recruiter, and he had talked about how he could, to become part of something that's bigger than him and more important than him, but collectively required a bunch of people to do things together. And he seemed to like that. And he enlisted in the Navy, went through boot camp, and his first command was Carl Vinson. And he's telling me this story, and I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, well, all right. So I have my gang problems over here, my challenges there, wanting to desperately be part of something more constructive, but it transcends economic strata, and then it transcends the types of your background, the family ethos here in terms of wealth, and the wealth element didn't play here. Every one of these people wanted a group of people where they could have a family, where they could have a tribe, where people were relying on each other to do great things. So I thought, well, this is not a tremendous problem, but I'm glad that that he's here, and I'm looking forward to working with him. Well, 2 weeks later, I get a call from a Navy attorney who says, hey, listen, Mr. and Mrs., I'm going to call them X, Mr. and Mrs. X, reached out because they understand that their son is on your ship, enlisted on your ship, and they didn't know about it, and they didn't give him their permission, and they're going to sue the Navy. They're going to come after the Navy because they think that we encouraged him to enlist under false pretenses, essentially. So I said, well, I just happened to have a conversation with him. He seems to be pretty happy here. What do we need to do? And the attorney felt like what we just need to do is make sure that the young man explained to his mom and dad that he wanted to be there, and he wanted to stay, and he wanted to do that. And if not, maybe we'll try to figure out another way to get him out of the Navy if that's what everyone wants. We just don't want to create a war here. It's not worth it. So I asked him to come up and see me, and we had this conversation, and he said, well, I'm not going anywhere. I like it here. I like the people that I'm working with. I like the people who are in my little neighborhood, my birthing compartment. I feel like I'm doing something productive. I feel like people need my help, which is very, very important to me. So I'm not leaving. I said, well, I think you need to talk to your parents and have this conversation with them. And if they want to have a conversation with me later on, or immediately following. I will not be there when you have the conversation with your mom and dad. That's not appropriate. But if they would like to talk to me, I will do that. So we set up a video teleconference for him, and I'm not sure how long it went, quite frankly, because I was busy doing other things. But when it was over, he came back and thanked me for allowing me to do that. That his mom and dad, while they were just sort of awestruck by the fact that they didn't realize that there was no connectivity, there was no feeling of love or what have you there, that they respected his decision and were proud of him, and that they would ask if they could become more in touch and closer in touch with each other, which was already a win. And yeah, mom and dad would like to talk to you. And so we set that call up. And I just basically told them, I said, listen, I'm not judging anybody here. What I think that we ought to agree on here is that for however and whatever reason, this young man elected to raise his right hand and swear an allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and all of those little tactical issues in the preamble, which this is a big deal. I mean, he gave his promise to us. He's got this courage that is so important to be able to go out and do things that need to be done while he's in harm's way. And we should all be proud of him. I'm proud of him. I hope you become more proud of him and stay engaged with him. And if there's anything I can do to help you, I will. But I think this ought to be between you and him, and work through those things and try, because I think he is light years ahead of where you ever thought he might be already at the age of 18 years old. That's what I think. So, I never had another conversation with them. I was always sort of watching what was going on with this young guy. He was on my radar, if you will, just to make sure that there wasn't something bad coming from home. And I never saw anything about it, and things just went on the way they were going to go. I had and there are a lot of young ladies and not so young ladies that join the service for a variety of different reasons, and some of them are for bad reasons. And I had a sailor that had been in the Navy for 17 years, and a fairly senior enlisted sailor, and she joined because she had been badly treated. I'm sugarcoating this because I don't want to. I said, I just don't want to get into the this is not about hyperbole for me or in making this a bigger story than it is. But let me just say, all kinds of bad things were happening from the family environment, and she needed to get out of there and join the Navy. And her story was interesting because, and I just began to think that that she needed the Navy more than anything. We were the first solid home that she had ever had, and that she was fearful that someday she would be not able to be there. And so we had an issue, and Doc Kaufman's going to work that issue, and did work that issue with her. But my assurance to her was that I don't have any intention of telling you that I'm proud to have you here, and I'm glad that you're here, and we'll deal with everything ends sooner or later, right? But we'll make sure that you're prepared when that day happens. We'll make sure. And Doc Kaufman worked with off-ship agencies and entities to just keep her engaged. And when I stayed in touch with her even when she retired, because I wanted to make sure things were going well. And the Navy had done an exceptional job. It was a team effort, right? Internal to the ship and external to the ship. The Navy had done an exceptional job of preparing her for what came next, and she was a productive, healthy person. And really what she got out of those discussions was a confidence that what she learned, technically, and the manners and the morals and the ethics in which she put to this job were game changers for her for the rest of her life. And she did really great. The last story I want to tell you is a difficult one because, like I said, we all have baggage and we all react to stimuli that are a little bit different. It had a happy ending, so I don't mind going through this story. I used to see this young man on the flight deck every day, and he had a colored jersey on. Again, I'm not going to tell you the color of the jersey. We had different colors: yellow, blue, white, green, brown, red, that signified various jobs on the flight deck. And this young man, it seemed like the harder he worked, the bigger he smiled. The dirtier he got, the happier he was. He worked so hard, and I saw him, and I had gone down to the flight deck control, which is where they have their meetings before the flight dops for the day and for the night maintenance and everything, and asked who he was, and got a chance to meet him and tell him how impressed I was about what he had been doing for us, and just thanked him, and he thanked me back, and pat on the back, and off we go. Well, one night he was down in his berthing compartment and getting a haircut, and one of the other sailors was giving him a bad time about the quality of the cut or something, and Sailor 1 turned around and popped him in the nose, broke his nose. So when you're at sea, commanding officers have non-judicial punishment articles, from the legal manuals that allow me to be able to go and adjudicate various certain low levels of what I guess crime. I mean, things that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to hit somebody in the nose. And so this was one of them. And so he came to mast, and I said, all right, listen, I just need to understand why. What would a haircut, So the young man whose nose was broken and now eyes blackened was there as well, because there's a witness. And I said, I just need to understand, because you're telling me you did it, and that's okay. I appreciate your honesty, but there's got to be more to this. And he just said, no, he pissed me off, and boom, off he went. So I have the ability to take away a pay grade. I have ability to take money. I have ability to restrict people to the ship for a period of time. And I gave them all of those at the maximum that I could give them. Because assault or hitting somebody on the ship is not gonna cut it. Well, it wasn't 2 weeks later when he's sitting in the berth in the import cabin, and he's telling me a story that would rock your socks. I'm going to stay as far away from this one as I can, but this is true. It would rock your socks. And the end point was, and it was internal to his family. And the end point of this was that he had made a determination. He says, okay, if I'm ever put in a state of stress or duress or anger, that I'm never going to take it out on myself. I'm going to take it out on the person or the people that caused me to get angry, that caused my personal operating system to become really corrupted. So that's essentially what he did. And he turned around at this young man, popped him, because he didn't want his anger to go in. He didn't want to internalize the anger. And that's what he did. So I'm hearing his story. I'm thinking about the captain's mast, and I'm trying to figure out, well, all right, now, I wish I would have, and there's no way I was going to know this. He wasn't going to, this just came out because Doc Kaufman's having his conversations with him. And so I brought the doc in, I brought the lawyer in, I brought the department head in, who owned both of those people. I said, I want to see if there's a way that I can give this young man a second chance, because I think Doc, if we can work with this young guy and get him, again, the help he needs, which was more than just the help that we were going to be able to give him on the ship. But at least we knew about this now, and we could make sure we provided him an environment where he could do well. I want to find a way to see if I can suspend these punishments. They'll still be hanging over his head, because if in fact he acts out again or does something, anything really that is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, then they will be reactivated plus whatever else happens. So the lawyer said you can do it, but you only can do it if the young man whose nose was broken agrees to it. You got it. You can't just do it for no reason, because you'll lose the trust and confidence of not only the person who was injured, but perhaps scores of others. So I brought the young man down to my stateroom, and I had, again, the lawyer and the department head in there. Doc wasn't there for this conversation. And I said, I want you to trust me. I need you to trust me because here's what I want to do. I want to suspend the punishments that were imposed on your shipmate, and because I want to give him a chance. I can't tell you why. I just want to give him a chance to become a better person, a better sailor. And I want him to start by apologizing to you, and that would be a great first step. And he interrupted me. He says, Captain says, he's already come, right after Mass, he came over and apologized to me. He wrapped his arms around me and he cried on my shoulder. I don't know what was going on there, but I just told him it's okay, that we can work through this. And so I'm so glad that we're having this conversation now, because I was hoping there's a way we could give him a second chance as well. I mean, it was just like, holy cow, this is great. So I brought him back in. I brought the person who had been had hit the other sailor, and the sailor whose nose was broken, and just the department head, and of course the lawyer. And I said, all right, we've made a mutual agreement here that we want to give you a second chance. We want to, but here's it is, so we explained it, suspended, I won't repeat all that, you've heard it. Young man, your shipmate here wants this to happen to us, agreed to it. And they went through the whole hug again. It was just like, wow, this is so powerful. And so we got through that, and that's where it ended there. Doc Kaufman, again, started working his magic with lifelines off the ship. He was doing well on the ship. We understood what his challenges were. He did not want to leave the ship until we got back to home port. It was just so important to him. And we agreed to try to make that work, and it did work. We just kept a close eye on him. Only very few people, 3 or 4 of us knew what the challenges were here. Really, only 2 of us knew the real challenges. Department head didn't have any idea, because I didn't want it to go anywhere outside that lifeline. But he knew that we had made some discovery, if you will, and that we were going to make this work. This young man served for 28 years. For 28 years. Honorable discharge. Has a family. Doing great. So you'll never get to know all of your people. It's an endless challenge, but we know they're out there. From the doc and from all these conversations, I learned to read eyes a little bit better, body language a little bit better, the types of answers I was getting a little bit better. I'm far from qualified to do anything with my knowledge, but it made me a better listener and a much better person when I had these conversations with people. I've stopped people to have conversations a lot more often, because it wasn't just passing in the night as you're walking down a passageway. I would spend a lot of time in berthing compartments at night, as long as I wasn't interfering with a game of cards or something, and just having these conversations one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-many. I probably just scratched the surface, but man, was it a powerful lesson in the importance of knowing your people. That's the story, ladies and gentlemen. What great people we have. What great leaders we have. And what a great support mechanism has been created between ships and shore stations. The thing that we've always got to do is make sure that nothing gets lost in the middle, and I know people are working really hard on that. I hope everyone has a great Navy day. Another 3,600 meters in the pool today. I'm loving life, and I hope you are too. Talk to you soon.